Hey everyone. While we have tried to make this channel as much about practical play as possible, Paddy and I do love Theory Hammer. We love hot takes. We love the hype around Warhammer and the ridiculous overreactions at the moment. We want to keep this page, we want to keep this channel as positive as possible, and we like to indulge the lurching of metagames around the world as the sky seems to fall in everywhere where this incredibly popular game is either taking off or about to end completely in a pile of dragon-fueled, or I suppose flames and rubble that means that no one should play this anymore and sell all their models. So with that in mind, we knew that the London Grand Tournament or GT was coming up and thought this was a great chance to sort of jump on the hype train. We've been talking a lot about dragons and what might happen, but also this is the type of tournament with a lot of really serious players, I guess, who have a presence on the internet and are trying to win and take the types of lists that some people might seem as squeamish. And we at times probably might not enjoy playing against, but we have a lot of respect for tournament players and what they do to try to win and how we can all sort of benefit and have a greater game because of that. So yeah, with that in mind, we wanted to have a look. We were following the results of this tournament to see what would be in store and look forward to the videos of a lot of the competitors who played there as their experiences trickled down from the event. But what the narrative seemed to be, and while this was a 2-day event, and it felt like from the beginning that this might be the way it was going to go, in the end, Bretonnia definitely dominated this tournament. So they took all four of the top five. Well, they took four of the top five, and there were other Bretonnian players in the top 10. It's worth looking into what are in their lists because, 2 weeks ago, everyone was terrified that dragons were the be all and end all of Warhammer. And in this format, there were two double big dragon, in sense Star Dragon or Black Dragon lists that did well, but at the same time, the Bretonnian players, four out of the top four players, particularly the two undefeated players at the end of round four as well, and James Ramsey here, who was undefeated in the event overall, but drew early on in the event, taking the top four is a pretty big statement about where the competitive metagame is at the moment. So what I thought I'd do is when you look at the lists, it's interesting to think about what makes them truly great, and it might not be something that you necessarily thought was the one thing, which we all like to do in these hot takes, is pick on that one broken thing. It was dragons over the last 3 months or whatever on the internet, and now is it the Falcon Horn? Is it the Green Knight? Is it Peg Knights? Could it be the fact that you can take the virtue of heroism and then also sort of kill these big dragons? I think you'd be surprised that each of the top five or top four lists they weren't uniform, even though they looked like they'd been sort of testing partners or people who had taken similar events and worked out what they thought was good about Bretonnia. So I just want to run through each of the lists and look at what they had and what they didn't have from that list. So Luke Blackl won the whole event. He won 20-0 in the last game against James Gascoigne. And this is what he had. He did have the 2 units of Peg Knights. They're only smaller units compared to others with 3. He did have the Green Knight. He did have a wizard, just a flat level 4 battle magic wizard, but doesn't have the virtue of knightly temper, which was really big in the tournament. So that's the one that gives you extra attacks and hatred. He did have the virtue of knightly heroism on his Duke, but he wasn't using the Falcon Horn and wasn't running an Exiles list, which I've just put with Bombards because the people who were running Exiles were also running Bombards, which are cannons, if you're not aware. So yeah, interesting that was his list. He's did the best. He scored the most battle points. He's the winner of the tournament where Bretonnia has dominated, and it'll be interesting to see as he has his own channel how he regales us of how this came about, and particularly how you might win against other Bretonnian players. James Ramsey was 4 wins and a draw. He had 2 units of Peg Knights, bigger units. I think they were 5, maybe even 6, definitely 5 in some, but the 2 units. He had the Green Knight. He didn't have a wizard at all. He's running an Exiles list, so you can't have a level 4. but he didn't have a wizard at all. He had the virtue of knightly temper, but he didn't have heroism, interestingly enough. So he didn't have the virtue with killing blow and monster slayer. So you can't run a magic weapon with that. He did have the frontier axe. So hopefully he and James, who will get to, who are running a similar sort of list, can talk about why that is, because a lot of people are talking about monster slayer being the answer, but maybe it isn't. Maybe there's somewhere a different way to go. That he was running the Falconhorn and was running an exiles list, which included 2 bombards. Edmond Dimi came third. He lost in his second round, but then won out from there to go 4-1. He had 2 units of Pegasus Knights, 5 each. Didn't have the Green Knight. Did have a Wizard, level 4, and had both virtues on different heroes. So, however, not running the Falconhorn at all to stop flying, and this was just a straight brand army list, didn't have the exiles or bombards in there. So interestingly, did have 20 units of knights on foot, and was running 2 units of men-at-arms with the stubborn, the Grail Pilgrim, and I think the is it Reliquary that makes them stubborn. That was interesting in itself. So sort of very different list to what the other guys who sort of had more tuned lists that had the Green Knight involved, which is interesting because that was the sort of the talk amongst competitive players about it being broken, so to speak. But here you have someone who came third without it. And then beyond that, James Gascoigne, who was sort of leading the competition with Luke throughout and was on the final table, but did lose comprehensively in that final game. He only had 1 unit of Peg Knights, interestingly. So really, like if he has the Green Knight, he has the level 3 Outcast Wizard that exiles are allowed. Had Lore Familiar, so I imagine that Dark Magic spell, the 5th one that gives you Hatred and Friends Battle Lust, is probably being chosen every game, and had both the virtue of knightly temper and virtue of heroism. Sorry, I shouldn't have called it knightly heroism, but it's just the virtue of heroism. And the Falconhorn, and he's running exiles, and he's got access to both the 2 cannons as well. So interesting there. He and James Ramsey seem to have really similar lists, but James went without a wizard at all, which I thought was going to be a bit of the narrative later on, and whether you needed one if he had done well, which I guess he did, coming second anyway. But that across the 4 Bretonnian armies that came in the top 4 places, none of them had the same or access to all of those things that we think might be broken. I mean, imagine James's closest, he did have 1 unit of 6 Peg Knights, but I wonder, it'll be telling, I suppose, if we can look at that final game and what the difference might have been and whether how losing 20-0 in the final there must be some edge that Luke's list had over him. So because there were a lot of cagey draws in the tournament, it'll be interesting to hear from the players who are there and how they went about playing a winning game in this sort of metagame. I just wanted to touch on the 5th place list. There are a couple of other lists from people who went 3 wins, 1 loss, 1 draw. George Gadaroth's Beastman list was doing very well. He only lost 9-11 to James Gascoigne in the 4th round. Drew another round, but on top of that, he's out of the top 10, one of the few lists that didn't have a dragon at all otherwise, and had one of the highest strengths of schedule. So the opponents he played tended to do better on average than other players. Interestingly, yeah, he's running a triple Gorgon list. So Gorgons have fallen out of favor. I'm painting up a Beastman army and felt like maybe the meta game had moved on as well, and they were easy to outmaneuver. But 3 Gorgons who have Monster Slayer and Killing Blow and are pretty resilient, but have Frenzy too. Underneath that, I guess he had the 5 Razor Tusk herds, which a lot of players think are efficient use for their points. I imagine they're there to help screen those Gorgons too, but they help you win the deployment drop or the drops so that you can set up the way you'd like, because you have 5 individual Razor Tusks setting up separately, but they are a very efficient use of points. Underneath that, he has a Doombull with the Ogre Blade, ended up with a 2+ armor save, including the Blackened Plate, which gives you a 3+ ward against flaming attacks. So it could be that the Doombull is out on its own as well, sort of providing that 4th big character that can threaten a dragon or a ridden monster with the Ogre Blade. He was running the level 4 with Hag Tree and had 3 Dragon Ogres with a bunch of Gores too. So that was probably my pick of the most interesting of the non-Bretonian, non-dragon lists. There were some others that we had our eye on as the tournament went. A triple Carnosaur Lizardman list that did okay, a Chaos Dwarf list that was sort of going well for a while. It's certainly great to see people taking other counters in the metagame, but it's hard to not think that the takeaways from this tournament are that Bretonnia is probably better than the Dragon metagame, but how or what exactly that is, I would encourage you to have a look. Luke Blackl has his own channel. Ed from Close Order, I imagine, will cover this event in great detail, and hopefully we hear from those players about where the edges really are in this Bretonian list that is probably going to be in the metagame for a while now. Anyway, thanks for listening. And as usual, any sort of comments you have on this tournament, or if you can direct other people viewing to where they can find more info and content from this event, we'd love for you to point it out. Thanks a lot. We'll see you next time.